You've recovered, have you? Yes, I hope so. Well, yes, it's the start of another year. Don't think you've escaped this. Oh no, here we go again, eh? Hope you're keeping well, and as I say, I hope you've recovered from your New Year's celebrations. If you had any, over here in the United Kingdom, most of them were wiped out, sadly, with very terrible bad weather, and it's such a shame, as I said, because people put their heart and soul into these things, celebrations, fireworks, bonfires, that sort of stuff. But unpredictable weather can never really, well, what can you do? Yes? Did you just stay in and have a little snifter and perhaps see in the new year that way? Or were you like many people, do you prefer to see it out by falling asleep? Yes. I don't know about you. I can't be doing with all those late night shows with everybody sort of faking like, oh, I'm really happy. You think, yeah, right, okay. I just like to celebrate the new year and be grateful for things. Do you? It's a little bit like this, and when I mention this, it's an interesting story because, as I've said to you many times here on the show, I'm always fascinated by exactly what the royals do behind the scenes. People pick and poke at them and say, oh, they're not worth their money, they don't do this. But actually, behind the scenes, if you delve hard enough, you find things out. And as many people know, I'm lucky enough to work with many of the people associated with the British monarchy, like historic royal palaces and of course the Royal Collection Trust. And this is where you get kind of access to certain things that you don't necessarily see. You see, cast your mind back to 1912. I know, I understand that. I know none of us were here in 1912, but 1912 in July was a very pivotal year. That's because at the Palace Theatre of Varieties in Cambridge Circus in the very heart of London, the very first Royal Command performance took place. And this really was originally engineered by King Edward because he was a massive fan of the music hall, vaudeville music hall, that sort of stuff. And I suppose the way you describe it today really would be like the pop scene against classical music. Suddenly these stars like Vesta Tilley, Little Titch, Mary Lloyd were singing these rather risque songs like The Boy I Love Is Up in the Gallery and When I Take My Morning Promenade, all with a wink and a nudge, and with riotous audiences enjoying a drink, sometimes round tables, either sitting in sort of, as we now know today, traditional theatre. That was exactly what the Palace Theatre was. It was run by a man called Sir Alfred Butt, and Mr. Butt was a personal friend of the King, King George, and Queen Mary. And of course he pushed forward with this Royal Command performance simply because he knew, and it's a little bit like today in the world of show business, when you fall foul of favour and suddenly your star does not shine as bright as it did, well, where'd you get your income from? And so the idea of the Artist Benevolent Fund, part of the Royal Variety, was to make sure that if you did fall on, difficult times, that sort of stuff, well, then you could go to them and hopefully they may give you a little money to sustain you over till your star shone again. Maybe a little lower on the bill, but nonetheless shining. You see how this works. Now, King George, as one can imagine, it was a very tricky bill because, as I pointed out before, even though he liked the idea of many raucous sort of acts on the show to liven things up, the producers behind it, oh no, you couldn't have that, and they had like thousands of petals coming down on the audience and stuff. But what he really wanted, perhaps not so much Queen Mary, was those songs that he'd already seen himself in the music halls. Now, where it gets interesting is, the bottom line was, well, it was a success and it raised a lot of money, but it took a few years for him to be able to push through with his many ideas. And in many respects, he reminds me of the later Duke of Edinburgh, His Royal Highness Prince Philip. He was forward thinking, you see. Now imagine by 1912, silent pictures are starting to take off. And one of the King's ideas was, well, why can't we film some elements of this show? Let people in the bioscope, the cinemas, see this show. And then maybe we could sell even more tickets. And maybe people would talk about the acts and this may get to come and see them in the theatres and all that sort of stuff. But you see the bosses, oh no, it's a little prissy for that. We're not going to do that. But his forward thinking really took hold because as he got further and further down the line, of course, during his reign, he pushed and pushed and pushed. As I say, a little bit like Prince Philip. And not only that, he was able to get the newspapers to put pictures in, to show some of the acts, to show the royals arriving, the bits that we now know basically today. In 1926, though, he took it to a new level. This was the very first time that the BBC broadcast live excerpts from the Royal Variety performance. And this would have been, can you imagine listening round the radio at some of your favourite stars now coming through your wireless set and entertaining you? And really this was all down to His Majesty the King, because even the BBC, headed of course by the very dour and sour Lord Reith, thought, oh no, we don't want that. But he said, yes, we do. This will help all of those concerned, the charity and the acts. And that's exactly how the Royal Variety as we know it today took off in this form. Now, what you may not know is the very first televised Royal Variety was in 1960 from the Victoria Palace Theatre in the very heart of London. And on that show, which was christened the Sammy Davis Jr. Show, was that good friend of mine, Lionel Blair. And he told me that Lionel stole the show. Simple as that. Everybody loved him, he was the talk of the place, but this was the very first time that it was broadcast live across the United Kingdom. And that again was really, the person behind that was none other than Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, who said, I think you might get more interest if we went live. And so they did for a few years, but they found it quite difficult to basically make sure all the acts ran to time. And the reason why you see it now pre-recorded is simply they can edit it to make sure the acts do. Yes, that's the trouble with vaudeville and variety acts. We always like our moment in the spotlight. Neil Sean, Kensington, London.